Hi Sandra, how's it going?
I'm good, thanks. Who's that I'm talking to?
Good. Sorry, this is Rebecca Watson.
Oh,
Let
hello,
me
Rebecca.
sorry, I'm tagged.
Yeah,
Did
that's right.
something very odd.
I always find it's good to be on early to check the video and the audio.
Yeah, I'm just looking at calendars and you're right. I can't.
Hello.
Councillor Pesco.
Hello. Am I the? Oh, no, am I the only one here? No. Sarah, Kesh.
What you eating for lunch, Rob?
Haven't had cases.
Homemade bread.
I've heard about your legendary baking skills.
I don't think it's legendary. It's an attempt.
I'm looking forward to maybe you could share that to the Economic Development Committee one time.
Give us our daily bread.
Absolutely.
Goes well with a glass of red wine too.
Does it?
But not for lunch. No, not for lunch.
I'll just to advise, sorry to butt in, we are live streaming this, so this is up onto YouTube, just so everyone is aware.
Thank you.
G'day, Calvin. What have you been up to for the last few weeks?
Afternoon, everyone. I've been sitting here trying to work out how I'm going to model these white polyester tops with the smashing grey trim on it.
Stunning, stunning. The step up from the high vis, huh?
Absolutely.
G'day, Maxine.
Get up.
Ah. You're really going to put a barbecue in your apartment, Ewan?
Yeah, I've got one already.
Ah, best. Is it a Weber?
Yeah.
Oh, enjoy.
I'm just reading the instructions of how to.
It'll change your life. Have you done much slow cooking barbecuing before?
Not a huge amount.
You
And
will.
never with coals. It's always been gas.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
my son-in-law has one, and I've seen him do it, and I thought, you know what, that would be quite interesting.
It's very vogue at the moment. It's very, very fun.
I know you're an expert because
No, nowhere near like Sean Ray sort of status. Nowhere near it. But he's.
I've tasted some of the proceeds of your great cooking.
Yes, you had the pulled beef, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll gladly teach you
I
that.
haven't seen you do my press-up challenge that I sent you.
Oh, did you send me one? That's gone around because Jeff challenged me a while ago. So.
Because I filmed it incorrectly the first time, didn't quite have the right angle.
Same.
Then realized I only did 20 and the challenge was 25.
Oh.
So I had to do it again, but I did wait about 40 minutes before I did it the second time.
Nasty. Yeah, I had the same thing happen. 50 is a lot for a man of my age and weight, I can tell you that for nothing.
Yeah. All good.
Right.
Hi, sorry, people.
Hey, Paula.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hope you guys all got to stretch your legs or something in lunch break.
Thank you. Yep.
Right, so this afternoon session is one that we had determined could be open to the public, not having the same need to protect confidential debate or information in this item. So just so that you know and you're aware that this is live. So welcome to anybody who's tuning into this debate. Who is going to lead us off on this topic, which is...
I will, Paula.
You are, Sandra? Cool.
Yes.
Cool. So if you can lay the context out and then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Sure. I'll just quickly share my screen so you can see. So this afternoon, members, we're here just discussing the mobile shops aspect of the trading in public places policy. If you will recall, staff were recommending some minor changes to this policy, and it was taken to Community Committee on the 20th of February. And on that date, the Community Committee requested this item come to an elected member briefing for further discussion around the mobile shops aspect. Email communication with elected members clarified the exact details of what was wanted in the discussion, which was just that mobile shops, specifically around the food trucks in the CBD area. Today, what we're just hoping to get, I suppose, is a little bit of guidance from you as to what you'd like to see in this policy, what aspects of the mobile shops sort of issue that you'd like us to prepare more information for when we bring it back to you at Community Committee. And we'd also like a little bit of guidance, because at the meeting on the 20th of February, we were going to bring the trading in public places policy and the safety in public places policy together to maximise the consultation resources for them going out. So just some clarification there as to if there is additional work to be done on the trading in public places policy, whether we can continue the safety in public places public consultation without the trading in public places policy going with it. Just at a late moment, there was also a request for at this meeting to discuss the possibility of changes to fees and charges for outdoor dining. So there was that issue as well to add to the discussion today. So from here, I'll just be listening in. I've got Calvin here as well to answer any questions, but we're just really wanting to get that feedback and guidance from you on what you would like to see in this policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hang on, sorry, just coming. Yep. I put a new battery in my mouse, but it's still playing up. Anyway, here we go. Sorry, so I have questions from Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Look, just to bring a little bit more clarity to it too, Sandra, I think the discussion was around at that community meeting, the issue that we had included in there that we could only have food trucks in town during events, and we were talking about how much looser we can make that. So I think that was pretty much the reason it got kicked into a briefing, if I remember rightly. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Yes, as to whether it was just events and marketplaces or whether you wanted something more than that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I personally want something more than that, but yeah, I'll be happy to listen to everybody else.
Okay, are there any other questions on this? I think it's really important that we give staff a clear steer about what we need to know to finalise and complete this policy. We'll start with questions, but then we will go to some debate on it. But I would like to make sure that everybody's questions are answered before we go into any feedback or debate. So are there any other questions? Does everybody feel like they know this inside out then? Oh, sorry, Kesh. Hi, Kesh.
Hi, just a quick one. As part of the engagement side of the policy, will we be speaking to local business owners or the actual vendors themselves?
We have gone to the Hamilton CBD Association on 2 occasions, spoken to Vanessa there, asking her for some feedback on the proposals that we put forward, and she has sort of generally indicated support for the proposals we put forward and indicated a few additional concerns around the permitting side of the process that we could also look at separate to the policy review aspect of it. But yes, we have got some early kind of feedback from them. However, without having guidance from elected members, it's difficult to know what we're getting feedback on, but we will continue to have conversations there.
Thank you.
Maxine.
Yeah, thanks, Kish. That was my question. However, are we aware of any past feedback from, I'm thinking leaseholders in particularly the Garden Place area about allowing that kind of activity, unchecked into that area?
Yes, the enforcement officers report that at previous occasions when mobile shops have, sort of impinged a little bit closely on the CBD area, that a number of complaints tend to come in from actual shop owners who have leases because of the impact that it can have. So, for example, a coffee cart coming into the CBD and parking somewhere close to 2 or 3 cafes can really have a detrimental effect on the business that comes into those cafes when the coffee cart is nearby. So it's there's certainly some concerns there around the impact on people who have these additional costs in the CBD of having leases to pay and all of those additional costs, and a coffee cart can be quite undermining of that.
Ewan.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paul. It was that point I was really interested in getting a better understanding on. And so if we are going to hear from participants that it can't just be those who've got the food trucks who want to move them into town, I want to hear from the restaurants that have been loyally paying their rates and rents and doing their business for years, and how they would be negatively affected, or in fact, would they not be negatively affected? So I really want to get both sides of the argument so that we have a much broader understanding of our decision. Because I think, the idea of wanting to stimulate activity in the CBD should be fully embraced, but we don't want to open a new area of business while detracting and harming those that have been in that sector for so long. So they would be my only, questions or hopes that we will cover in detail.
Just in response to that, when I spoke to Vanessa from the Hamilton Central Business Association, she said that among her members there was a variety of opinions for and against allowing mobile shops into the CBD, and I would suggest that if it was going to be allowed in a broader manner than just at events and markets, that there would need to be a fairly comprehensive engagement process with businesses to really to determine their views on that matter, and perhaps to consider what restrictions are actually rational and from their perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Mark.
Thank you. Here we go. Oh, I'm unmuted. Am I?
You're fine.
Yeah, you can hear me. Cool. Hey, right. So, am I right in that at the moment food trucks are actually free to go into Victoria on the River, but they're not free to go into Garden Place? Is that right?
I'll let Calvin get that one.
That's correct. The area which the prohibition relates to is bounded by Victoria Street, London Street, Anglesey Street, and Knox Street. So right. Victoria on the River sits outside that area, much like, as the question was put to me previously, down outside where Madam Wu is also outside the restricted area.
Yeah, pretty steep place to have a coffee cart. But
absolutely, but someone was concerned it could be in competition with Madam Wu.
Yeah, it was interesting, that one. So Sandra, what I'd be really interested to find out is if we could get some sort of consensus, as Ewan says, it could be positive or negative, but how easy is it to put into the bylaw that they can't open within a certain proximity of an already open lease-paying cafe or something to that effect? So, because I've heard of food places that have complained vigorously about food trucks being there and then not having been opened themselves at the time of the event. So how easy is it to perhaps stage it so that they can have minimal yet positive effect?
Well, we can put anything in the policy that we want, really. The question is the feasibility of enforcement of it. Like how actually is it possible to enforce that, and what impact might it still have? We could look at whether there are other ways around it. So, for example, setting times rather than locations, if you know what I mean. So, setting times when they can be there outside of when other things open. But it does all get very tricky because, of course, the trading sector changes all the time. And so,
big time.
Yeah, keeping up with that.
I guess the outcome we're trying to achieve is a really stimulated CBD, a vibrant CBD, and these things do bring that sort of stuff along. And it's sometimes, no, I'm commenting now, I'll wait till I comment afterwards. But so it can be done. And finally, are you aware of any other towns around the country that have pretty successful bylaws in this respect?
Again, we're talking about a policy, not a bylaw.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Policy.
Yeah, in relation to this. I don't specifically know of any other places that have it. I would suggest that it would be variable, with cities will be different to small towns.
Mark, I can update that in 2016, when we last reviewed it, we went round and we reviewed Auckland, Tauranga, Rotorua, Palmerston North, Porirua, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin councils. And it's probably fair to say that there was a mix across all of those, both in terms of what they would or wouldn't permit. Most of them, a number of them prohibited mobile shops from the central city. Others had dedicated areas where a mobile truck could set up and operate. And then they had a range of variable permitting and cost arrangements that attached. None of them were the same, in effect.
Right, cool. So I guess just finally, I'm really interested in the outcome that we're trying to achieve out of this policy, whether it's to restrict business or to encourage a scene, as it were. So I'll look forward to the comments. Thank you. Cheers, guys.
Okay, thank you. I've got Ewan next, I think.
No, I've already had a.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. That was my fault. I should have put my hand down there, Paula. Sorry.
That's all right. I can do it too, but I've forgot to. Sarah.
Thanks, Paula. Sandra, what I was wondering was what evidence do we have in regards to the impact of, having a broader or looser policy around food trucks and things? Because I guess I think everyone wants a similar outcome, which is a vibrant CBD, which attracts people, which is fun and interesting. And on one side, you could say having mobile food trucks will bring people in, and then there's the other argument around looking after the businesses that are there. So is there evidence and research that we can look at, or other examples of places to see what impact they've actually experienced? Because there's a difference between what people assume is going to happen and what actually does happen.
We can certainly look for any structured research that's been done in other places. That sort of research hasn't been done in Hamilton that I'm aware of. We do have shop owners give anecdotal comments that, like I say, when there is a coffee cart down the road, that their own business has dropped considerably for the period of time that is there. So it's yes, but we can have a look to see whether any more structured research has been done around that.
Yeah, and if there's a lack of structured research, then I guess the next best thing is then looking to talk to some of those councils where they do have more allowances for those food trucks, and then see what impact overall they've had, because it could be a longer term thing as well, that in the longer term you get more people attracted to the city centre, but in the short term you might have an immediate impact as well. So yeah, just more information would be good.
Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was hoping you weren't going to call me yet. Look, I've just come into it and out of this conference, and I may have missed a few things. So there's a clause in there, am I right, where it's saying the food trucks will be basically only able to operate during events and markets? Is that right? That's the one?
Yeah, so mobile shops, not just food trucks, just to be aware, mobile shops are broader than just food, but yes, at the moment the proposal is that only during events and marketplaces.
Yeah, sure. And which makes sense to have some sort of limits there. The feedback I'm getting from Central City businesses is that, can that be flexible? Say, if you've got a market every Friday night, can it be something like, you know, for a summer period, for a 6-week period, you've got a market or event every Friday night? Could it be like, you know, instead of having to apply for every single Friday night, could it be loose enough that it would say, right, yep, for the next 7 Friday nights, it's all go? Do you know what I mean? Rather than just having a thing where you actually have to go through a process every single time.
I can perhaps answer that, Deputy Jeff. Simple answer is yes, we can. That already exists, but that would suggest the vendor is aware that they do want it for the next X number of weeks, however many that is. That can be wrapped up in a single application.
Good. Okay. All right. No, that's fine, and getting strong feedback from Hamilton Central Business Association members that you know, they're keen on it for events and you know, to bring in that vibrancy. And obviously, whoever's kind of running the show isn't going to put a Malaysian food truck right outside a Malaysian restaurant or something like that. There's going to be, you know, plenty of room for discretion and nuance in the way that they're put together. That's at the moment, because I'm just catching up. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. We were just raising questions at this point. We'll go around and get some views on how we'd like to proceed with this. Just a question from me, following on from Jeff's, really, because I've had a few conversations with HCBA and others. Are there any ways to encapture in policy without being broad brush about it, they're either in this zone or they're not? Is there any other approach other than zone-based for food trucks, for example? Because I think Jeff's right. It's unreasonable to put a food truck of the same nature of food right in front of a restaurant that operates. We certainly want to support our hospitality sector by making sure that all city restaurants have the best chance of recovering from COVID. At the same time, we need to provide choices for people to make the CBD vibrant, you know, to come into the CBD, especially if that's attached to an event. It's ironic to me that the Victoria and the River as a zone, which we're trying to keep cars and various things out of, and I'd prefer there were no cars in there, quite frankly, but the VOTR space does have a couple of really good quality, 3 really good quality restaurants directly on it, and then 2 more adjacent on the other side that don't open up to Victoria and the River but are there. They can have food trucks, but Garden Place, for example, which has a number of food shops, not all of which stay open on the weekend or open during events anyway. So is there any nuance in that? I mean, because I noticed for Children's Day, for example, Valaric Cafe doesn't open, a couple of the other places don't open. So then there's no food in Garden Place that wouldn't be part of a food truck regime, apart from 1 or 2.
Calvin, do you want to take that one, or shall I?
I will try, and then you can come over the top and correct it, Sandra. Look, I'm not sure that you can easily nuance your way through that, Mayor Paula. I think we've had some goes previously, and then when this came through last time, there was an adamancy from elected members that was the area they wanted prohibited, hence why it's as bold as it is. That was clearly the direction we received last time that this came up for review. I suspect we can do what you're asking. I just worry it may get rather long and bureaucratic to try and counter for all of the respective parts. But I think if we have some clarity around the decision making and leave it with some opportunity to actually make some wise choices. And I think we'd have to have some confidence in whoever the decision maker is, that they could take that everything into account at the time of making those decisions based on what they understand.
Okay. So
Paula, could I just jump in just really quickly? Partly
I can't see who's talking.
Oh, sorry, it's Jen.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Hey, just in terms of your Children's Day reference, as an event, the proposed change to the policy would enable events and markets to have food trucks. So another option to consider is the potential to have specific locations that you allow.
Okay, so any event can have food trucks up to a limit, and does it suggest what number, what type, or make any guidelines for that, or is it courses for horses?
So
go ahead, Sandra.
So the current proposal is that food trucks, mobile shops would be allowed at events and markets, and the event organizer or the market organizer would determine which ones would be there. So there are opportunities, as well as Jen said, to set out specific locations or specific times. So, for example, if on a Saturday afternoon there is very few shops open in Garden Place, then perhaps you could say, well, at that time, we may, at our discretion, allow sort of certain food trucks to be there. Part of the problem is, and I'm sure Calvin will want to mention this, is the definition of what a food truck is. To have a very open definition of that means that you might get a mobile truck that is selling all sorts of things, and they just happen to sell a packet of chips, and they come in and claim that they are a food truck. So there's a need to actually have a bit of a vetting there and a bit of sort of control to ensure that the sort of mobile shops that you are wanting to have there are the ones that can get there.
I understand that, but then that's a matter of clarity in the policy. You can easily exclude trucks that are selling anything other than food as their primary product, can't you? Or even food or drink as their entire product. You can easily do that, surely, without having to be so broad brush. But the other thing I was going to say is that I know that I attend many, not so much lately, but I attend most events that go on, and I've been to a couple of events in our beautiful public spaces, which we're trying to enliven, and heard from the organisers that they were only allowed 2 food trucks, and then the queues for those are quite amazing. So I think there is somewhere in between. I certainly, I'm sympathetic to the hospitality sector, especially at this time. I really am, and I don't want to put anything in competition. But I'm wondering, in our public spaces that we fully expect to be used for as many events as we can possibly squeeze in there, such as Garden Place, Civic Square, not just Victoria and the River, that we could have a bit more of a flexible approach.
Mayor Paula,
enabling approach.
Mayor Paula, perhaps I could just make a couple of comments. We have unofficially run it that if someone was having an event for which they would normally have to apply to council for an event permit, and if they have an event permit, then the event organiser could have whatever number of food trucks he or she deemed appropriate if they were the event organiser.
Okay. So
I'm not aware of any restrictions being put on any event organiser in terms of numbers of food trucks that were applicable.
I've heard that a few times, so probably there's a lack of communication then, especially with some of our ethnic communities as to what they are enabled to do in that public space. I'm not going to, of course, expose anyone in particular, but I have had those conversations. And I've been at events where the queue has been pretty amazing for the 2 food trucks that were there. And apart from the one shop that stays open long hours in Garden Place, nothing else open. So, Anyway, look, I'll take questions from anyone else. I just think, in summary, I'd prefer to have something that was enabling vibrancy in the CBD. And I understand that HCBA is open to this with certain parameters around it. And I'm not sure, personally, unless you can persuade me, that the zone approach is the only approach to achieve that. Okay, that's my view. Mark, you're mute.
Yeah. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, I agree with Mayor Paula on that one. I think like if it was a priority approach, you know, you've got a lease there, a permanent lease, you have priority, and we work from that parameter perhaps. But there's a wee bit in there actually that I think no one's actually noticed too, and it's they're only allowed to operate until 10 o'clock at night. Now, every good student town has a late night pie cart. And I just wonder how flexible we are on that, because you know, by the time people actually start arriving in town at 10 o'clock at night, apparently, according to my daughter, then there's not a great many food places open as such. And I just wonder if that might be a more, you know, it actually might be quite a responsible thing to have more food places after 10. So are we set? Is there anything that's stopping us extending those hours?
There's nothing at all. Previously, up to the last time it was reviewed, at that stage, it used to be to 6 p.m. So the last council chose to extend it to 10, and there is perhaps no limit on how far you extend that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Look, I'd be keen to extend it out to sort of 1 or whatever it is. I'm just pulling a number out of my hat at the moment, but I'd be keen to see the options on that one too as you go out and talk to the businesses. But you got to have the right card.
Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a really good point, Mark, and agree with Paula's comments. Just in terms of defining an event, is that defined by someone having an event permit and then, or, you know, or a market? How, you know, because an event can be of all different sizes and shapes and forms.
The district plan currently sets out details about what an event is, and indeed sets out what the process for an event application is. So that's in the district plan at the moment, and it's the definition that we go with.
Right. Okay. In terms of, so we've talked about mobile shops and then food trucks specifically. So right now the suggestion is mobile shops generally during events and markets. So could we look at get a bit more advice or information around, you know, what we might want to do in terms of differentiating those? So, you know, it might be that markets and events you allow all mobile shops, or you still have some restrictions there. There might be some types of mobile shops we actually don't want, and I don't know if there are issues with that, but just to understand whether we would want any restrictions or if mobile is fine. And then, you know, if we're looking at broadening it outside of events and markets, should it just be food trucks or drink, you know, having some further advice around that would be really good. And finally, Mark, can't remember who brought it up, Paula brought it up, that there are a lot of ethnic communities who have events and that there could be a lack of communication or an ability to communicate fully with council. What is the information like at the moment in terms of, you know, if someone's organising an event, is it in different languages, and how accessible is it on our website?
Oh, you've caught me on that one, Kelvin.
I don't know that I can answer it in the detail. The event part is managed by our events team, and there are details on our website. I couldn't answer as to whether or not it is in multi-language. The thing I will point, the difference, and I may have misinterpreted you, and if I did, I apologise in advance. We're only talking about the only restriction at the present time is for the inner central city. Any other thing else that's being done by migrant communities or anyone else in terms of events, in terms of mobile shop presence, that's all ongoing. So this is not something which is completely unknown to them. We're talking about specifically for the central city.
No, there was just, Paula had mentioned a few, or at least one event where they'd said they'd only been able to have 2 trucks, which sounded like it wasn't actually the case. So
Councillor Sarah, if I might just answer that. So the communication on our website is not in different languages, but I can tell you that the events team work really closely with people who have events, and will communicate as much as they can. Sometimes our community development advisors are quite involved in the events that some of our migrant communities are putting on, so they're engaged in sharing that as well. And to your point about managing the type of mobile shops, when an event gets a permit, often they will be really clear about the type of mobile shops that they want. So the decisions around who gets to be part of that market rest with the event
right. Yeah.
organizer.
And that makes sense. That's probably a better way to go overall. Yeah. But in terms of engagement on this then policy, it would be good to have ensure that we are engaging widely and in an inclusive way, particularly as some of our ethnic communities do, contribute a lot in terms of that city centre vibrancy.
Thank you, Kish.
Thank you. With looking at events specifically, and often events can be for fundraising purposes. Events often, or the event organizer often charges or works out some sort of cut with having mobile trucks or food trucks as part of the event. So how would that work? Would it be up to the event organizer to arrange which trucks or mobile trucks can attend or not? Or, because a lot of the time those fees or charges can be used to just offset costs of the actual event. So how does that fit in?
Yes, at the moment it is the event organizer who selects which mobile shops are present at their event and determines whether they're going to have any fees or charges for mobile shops that are at that event.
Yeah, I find that interesting, because while I do think that the event organisers should have a bit of input as to the type and nature of food that they're going to serve, that in itself could cause issues, because it could be in conflict with local eateries, whereas having some control over that. I mean, to me, I'm wondering if we can have a process that's more enabling, but has some steps through to avoid conflict with local eateries, either in terms of the time those local eateries are open or the type of eatery that's by the food truck. Because if everything's kind of fairly closed up in that particular space at that particular time, things to me have a different process than if you had a fuller range of restaurants surrounding the food trucks that were all open and vying for business. But to me, it's around the events, it's the times that are extraordinary rather than everyday that I'm interested in. And maybe putting a limitation, is it possible to put a limitation on that? The amount of time that these food trucks would be present, as opposed to, there again, I go back to the geographic block. And it seems to me, while you've got the discrepancy between VOTR and Garden Place, doesn't make any sense to me.
We can certainly look at options for how we can to put in those sorts of restrictions or limitations to avoid a clash between a mobile shop and a local eatery. So we can come up with some options there for you to have a look at.
If you think about Civic Square, for example, outside City Council, apart from the potato cart that's had a licence forever, there's a coffee shop and there's a donut shop. That's it, full stop. Neither of which open particularly late. So in that circumstance, for example, why wouldn't you be able to put food trucks in that space? Sometimes, some prescribed times for some events. There's nothing open. Wouldn't it enliven that space?
So the event, the proposal to have the events allowed for under this change of policy would would
That would
cover
answer that.
And to your point about Victoria on the River, if you wanted that space and the space between Victoria Street and the river to also be subject to the same policy within that central city, then you could request that we just change that.
Well, personally, I think there should be some equity, and I'd like that tested to make sure that all publics. I mean, Victoria Street on the River is a new public space, but all public spaces are important to me, and all of them should be able to operate in a similar way. Just a matter of principle on that one. Mark.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump in and out, but I'm sort of trying to let the conversation flow because it's, again, some really good questions. But one area I couldn't find in there was who's responsible for the extra waste created by food trucks during, those later hours of operation? Is there anything in the policy about that, or?
At the moment, given that it is under events and marketplaces, in order to get an event or a marketplace, there are
Right.
things in there to say you have to be responsible for the waste. If it's broadened out to be beyond just events and marketplaces, then we would need to look at how is the waste from a mobile shop that is, say, just allowed to be in Garden Place and open until midnight. How is that waste going to be managed? Because it would end up in the litter bins, so then it would become a council problem. So you'd need to have a look at that.
So could you please, if we do look at the more free area, could you please look at something like that? Because I know Gourmet in the Gardens, they do a heck of a lot regards waste, and some of it will just be impractical up and down the street, wouldn't it? So yeah, I'd love some attention on that, please.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark, when you say some that was impractical, I might be another conversation to have.
I was more thinking about the dishwashing, the wonderful dishwashing caravan.
Silver service?
Silver service, thank you, yeah. And it might not be so feasible if they're spread out around town. But I think there's going to be an abundance of those cardboard plates and stuff filling up our rubbish bins, and so if we're ahead of the game, it doesn't need to be a problem.
Yeah, see, I wasn't hope nobody took me to mean that they should be spread out through town. I just mean they should be able to go into public spaces as opposed to spread out, but for a purpose, for a time, for a purpose in that space, rather than geographically based, which is the only point I'm raising here, really. We'll go around councillors and take a point of view in terms of how you're leaning. It's not a decision, of course. Because what's the process, Sandra? You'll make refinements and come back to council through which committee?
Yes, so I'll go out and I'll put together different options for these things that you've raised, and I'll go out and I will do some initial sort of stakeholder consultation, or just getting feedback from people, see if we can get a little bit of feedback from key stakeholders to feed into it. Then I'll bring that back to community committee with a report. And then from there, ask community committee to authorise going out for public consultation on whichever of those options and changes that you have a preference for.
Okay, thank you. So let's have a quick whiz round and see how people are feeling. You don't have to pin yourself to the mast at this point, but just indicate some areas or some thinking that you have, and then we'll get a sense of how everyone's feeling. Maxine? Sorry, you're just up top of my screen.
Oh, that's fine. I have a great deal of sympathy for businesses that are already within that area, and I also see the inequity that exists between Victoria on the River and Garden Place. I think that that's not very fair. So thinking about how we might be able to pull that area in is helpful. I see though that food trucks and mobile shops can add a real layer of interest and can be the catalyst to bring people in, which could benefit those shop holders as well. So I'm interested in having a look at what some of those options are, Sandra, and getting a better understanding of how we might be able to use those options together, taking into account the interests of all the parties in Hamilton as well, looking at both of the pros and cons, and that being an evidence-based approach would be really helpful. So that's me, really.
Thanks, Maxine. Mark.
Thank you. Since the last committee, I've been doing quite a bit of thinking on this one. And at the moment, of course, I'll have an open mind about it when it comes around. But at the moment, I'm favouring more of a geographical based thing, but where existing open tenants who are paying permanent leases have priority. So we've got to be sensible about it. I think we can provide a really vibrant space. I agree with Maxine that it's not fair that Victoria on the River has food trucks and Garden Place doesn't, but rather than rein in Victoria on the River, I prefer to open up Garden Place and be fair that way. Again, you've got note about extending the hours potentially, because food is actually a really valuable service at late at night. We've all grown up with that. Yeah, like I said, I'd be very keen to find out if we do open this up a little bit. And I am specifically talking about food trucks. I don't want to see those horrible retail trucks that go around endlessly down the main street. I think we need to actually tighten up. These are food trucks that we're talking about here. I don't see the need for any other sort of truck. But if we do open it up, I'd be really keen to see some sort of accord or some sort of thought given to how we provide waste services for that, good waste services for that. So I say bring it on at this stage, but I'll listen as it goes. And we've got a really good opportunity here to build a good cluster of entertainment in the centre of town.
Dave.
Thanks. I tend to agree with Mark. I don't need to speak much. It's all been said.
Thank you. Martin.
Obviously, I'm going to be listening extra closely to the Central Business Association and other representatives of retailers in that area, because I think currently, obviously, we've got a whole range of businesses that are been under huge challenge. So I just take a very cautious view, but I really want to I just want to obviously get the mix right. And I do very much want to hear from the HCABA. Totally get the discrepancy between Victoria and the River and Garden Place. Victoria on the River is a moving thing. We were hopefully going to open up more Victoria on the River eventually, get shops facing onto it, all of that stuff. So the presentation from the HCBA and other retail outlets is going to be really important for me at the relevant community meeting on this. And I'm just saying that while I want vitality and all of that, I just want to make sure that we don't do anything at all to make life harder for businesses that are paying rates, have huge overheads relative to a moving food truck. Obviously, it's going to be another conversation of how we get rid of those terrible retail trucks that go around neighbourhoods. That's a separate issue, but Bunty correctly reminds us that's another work in progress.
Thank you. Cash.
I would like to see more food trucks, and I do think that there's a place for them as well at events. I would be, I'm not too sure about having food trucks, all the time. I think that there should be a purpose for when they're there, only because local businesses have made an investment, and I think that we need to protect their investment. So we have to be mindful of the impact or potential impact that they can, that mobile businesses can have. So I think it's about striking the right balance, flexibility, and then of course listening to feedback from those businesses, which will be really important. All for adding vibrancy, buzz of activity. So I would like to see more food trucks at events in the central city. Agree about the extending the time at night. I think that would be quite good. Yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Cash. Jeff.
Thanks, me Paula. And look, I think we're heading in a good direction here. And Sandra, thank you very much for the work you've done. Appreciate it. And look, I agree with all the speakers, and I'm in quite a happy place with this. I think I support the food trucks in events and markets in all our public spaces in the central city. So I think Garden Place, to me, they should be absolutely, they should be there as well. And I think Mark made a really good point about the time. I think it definitely should be extended in my book. And I think we need to place a bit of trust. Martin made a really good point. Hamilton Central Business Association, we have set these guys up to play a big part in revitalising our central city. We put a lot of trust in them with activation plan and all that sort of stuff. So I think we need to work really closely with them and listen closely to them and other stakeholders, as Maxine said, and have an element of trust in the way that they kind of oversee some of this, because they know what they're doing in terms of, they know which restaurants are going to be a bit jumpy. They know, they know, and they know where you'd want to put food trucks, which restaurants you'd want to be a bit careful of. So I think we need to have some real trust in them and work closely with them on this. The good point Martin makes about the hospo businesses struggling, absolutely. I think our safeguard there is that this is for events, this is for markets. As Kesh says, it doesn't happen very often. And as Maxine says, it can actually work in that way where it actually adds some vitality and business for the existing businesses as well. So yeah, look, I think we're on a really good track. And thanks again, Sandra.
Sarah.
Thanks, Paula. I'd like to re-emphasize my point around wanting a bit more information. If there is evidence-based kind of information, that we can have that available to us. In terms of, whether we're restricting this to just events and markets or looking at expanding that, I think, more information around that, because I'm really open-minded. What I'd like to see is vibrancy in the city centre, more people wanting to be there, it being a more interesting place. So for me, it's just whatever's going to best facilitate that. And part of that is, maintaining and looking after existing businesses as well, but seeing where that right balance is. So I'm keen for us to consider beyond markets and events, but to the extent that it's going to be a positive thing for the city centre. And yeah, definitely support revising hours, revising the boundary overall. We are looking at eventually opening out up onto the river, and there could be opportunities, depending on space and access, for more things to be happening on that river side of Victoria as well. So would be future proofing, I guess, by reassessing those boundaries.
Thanks, Sarah. Ewan.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Mayor Paula. Really comfortable with the strategy concerning during events and markets. If we were to make it much broader than that, I start becoming very cautious, and I really want to get my head around unfair competition to existing players. And I'd want to be quite tight about some of the rules, particularly, I guess I could lean towards, much later in the evening, so after the conventional restaurants have finished. But if you were just asking today, I'm really comfortable with events and markets. I agree with everybody who's mentioned Hamilton Central Business. They are the ones that would help us formulate, because they know the players so well. And I really appreciate Mark's comments concerning, how we're going to manage the waste. I think that's really important, and we have to have some tight rules about that. So really keen to revitalise the CBD. I don't want to be the anti-fun police, but I want to protect the current businesses. And if we are going to make it broader, I want to see the evidence. It definitely has to have some tight rules, and it has to be probably much later. That's it.
Thanks, Ewan. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Look, I'm pretty much, I think everything that I had thought of and the notes I'd taken down have all been mentioned and discussed, and generally I'm in support of the general theme of the discussion today. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. I think that just leaves me. I just want to make a couple of things clear. I'm not talking about broad scale expansion of the food truck industry into the CBD. I'm talking about limited to the right place at the right time. And what I've been questioning here is whether that is best achieved through setting zones or through other mechanisms, just to be really quite clear. And I absolutely support Councillor's comments that we need to protect existing businesses that have invested in the CBD, especially now. But at the same time, the food truck industry is also needing a bit of support with Gourmet in the Gardens and Gourmet in the Garage taking a hit as well. Having said that, I don't want to see the whole CBD peppered with food trucks all of the time. Not what I'm after at all. Some equity around public spaces, some flexibility to make appropriate provisions for events, as you've suggested, Jen, sounds good to me. And I think I'd like to put more emphasis on that, around the provision and what's required to meet the threshold to bring food trucks in, rather than a geographic-based zoning approach, because you just don't know what spaces are going to be activated in the future for CBD vibrancy. I would like to think that all of our spaces get used: Garden Place, Civic Square, Victoria on the River, Embassy Park, and on Grantham Street, and a variety of other places too. All those beautiful public spaces become more vibrant the more people we can bring down there for events, for markets, and so on. But I do value our eateries. Just want to say another thing that's important to me in terms of the food trucks is I wouldn't want to create a situation where we open the door to food trucks coming down from Auckland and providing Auckland businesses with work in Hamilton. I'm very much for the buy local. So that's one thing I'd like to be considered, how we can support the local food truck providers, of which there are many, in preference to those that come. Oh, thanks, we're getting a couple of thumbs up, that's cool. In preference to those that come from further afield. So that's fairly important. Well, that's very important to me. Okay. All right. By the way, I hadn't thought about the timing of when this is introduced, and I'm open to the idea that we'd phase this in at the right time. I hadn't actually thought about that at all. So I'm not sure what the right time is, but we'd need to take some advice from some of the business organisations like Central Business Association, for example, and others as to when the time is right if we go to something that's different. Okay, well, that was a good debate, wasn't it? Any questions from staff? Any concerns?
Yes, if I could, Mayor, thank you for that guidance. It's really good to get a clear direction for me to go away and gather that information for you. There was just two last things. Firstly, at the moment, we were taking this policy through at the same time as the Safety in Public Place bylaw, which is now ready to go for public consultation. Are you happy if we separate those two things now and allow the Safety in Public Place bylaw to continue its progress through its review cycle while we do this additional work on the trading in public places policy? Is that all right?
That makes sense to me. I think we're a little bit away from getting this quite where we want it to be before. We've got a little bit more consultation to do. My only proviso on that, and it would have been nice administratively to do two things at once. My only question on that is whether there are any implications of this safe spaces. What did you call it? Sorry, got the name.
The Safety in Public Places bylaw was not linked in any way to the trading in public places policy. It was just that as they were, just as you said, administratively, as they were going through, we thought we might as well put them out together. But as this piece of work is now going to take a little bit longer, it'd be nice if we could actually continue the progress of the other piece.
So yeah, that's fine, so long as one doesn't have consequential effects on the other in a way we didn't expect. That's all. I'm happy with that. Is everyone else happy with that? Thumbs up if you are. We are. Cool.
And also there was just that last note that through emails, elected members wanted to also consider the fees and charges for outdoor dining permit fees, for example. Did you want me to put that up on the screen so you could see what that?
Yes, please.
So that is being considered through the annual plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so I know that I don't think we have Ryan with us today, do we? But I do.
All right, Paul, I know about it.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm supportive of this, us putting this up and discussing it in the annual plan. My feeling anyway is that we should be doing everything we can to help these businesses that are going to be, we know they're going to be struggling, and this is also quite a visible thing that we're doing, and it'll send a really good message as well as some practical help. So I'll certainly be happy to champion it and just see how it goes.
Okay, thank you. If you could just minimise that screen, Sandra, would be good. Just helps me see where the questions are. I was going to ask Ewan next because I know that you've had a joined up conversation with Ryan, Ewan and Jeff, right?
Yeah, look, I'm very keen on this, but I'm a little concerned that the annual plan process will drag on a little long. It's nobody's fault, but that's not going to be resolved until middle of July. Here we are on tomorrow going into level 2. And I just raised the question whether or not there's any appetite or ability for us to fast track this, to get it resolved quicker.
I don't know the practicalities of that. Let's talk about those first, Jen.
So there's a couple of options. There's a couple of options in that. Yes, you can fast track it, or one of your options at that annual plan process when we're dealing with all of the fees and charges is to accept this change and then backdate it to whenever, first day of lockdown or 1st of March or whatever is appropriate in your minds, and then we would provide those refunds if that was what the decision was.
Look, I'll be guided by Mayor Paula and Jeff, but it's always so much easier if we can just make it simple and that they wouldn't have to retrospectively apply for credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But what are you saying, Jen, there isn't an opportunity through council prior within current budgets, or no?
So it's not a budgeting issue. It's just a getting the decision made issue. So we can bring it to council. We can do an extraordinary meeting if that is what council wanted us to do. We could bring that for a decision. I mean, either way, part of that decision is effective as of whatever date you want it to be effective from, and it could be effective from the date of that decision or backdated to allow for the impact that has happened in this space since lockdown began.
Okay,
thanks, Jen. Can I suggest? I mean, I'd be keen for us. I agree with you, and to move it as fast as we could, if that was the will of the other councillors, the other elected members. Just knowing that, with our 12-point plan that we did, we kind of got on with it as quick as we could, and perhaps in the same sort of spirit, we could sort of move pretty quick with this. So personally, I'd be keen for us to advance it.
So you're taking words out of my mouth there a bit, Jeff. I was just going to ask if there's, given that we had a number of recovery mechanisms, and it's just recently been brought to our attention that this could potentially be another one. I am interested to get some feedback with staff following it on from this as to whether it can be brought together in a tidy fashion for a council meeting prior to the annual plan. Knowing, however, that it does have consequences on the annual plan budget as well. So we just need to be mindful of that. If we make too many decisions ahead of the annual plan, we can run into issues. But look, I'm open to it.
Are you comfortable with me coming back on email with some options for you to
Yes.
provide guidance?
Absolutely, that's the right course of action. Thank you. I've got Mark.
Thank you.
Rob.
Yeah, yep. I totally agree with Jeff and you and all that one, and that cash is king at the moment for these guys. Backdating it is nice, but it's not quite as helpful. And I think speaking in support of this too, with the new level 2, everyone must be seated type spacing thing. Any space we can provide these restaurants has got to be worth it to them. I mean, if we can get 3 more tables in a restaurant, could be the difference between making it or breaking it for them. So yeah, that's really cool. But we also, I guess, we have to impose upon them to be careful of people walking down the street as well. They have to. It's a lot of trust going into it. But I'm really supportive of it. I think it's great.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. And I think you're right. If we can bring to that briefing how that we will protect our accessibility for pedestrians and those people in wheelchairs or, you know, with transport needs, just because that's the reason why the original rules about pavement, I guess, were what they were, but so that it can be done in a way that enables more space and protects, you know, people moving around the city as well would be good.
So,
that one up.
sorry to butt in. Can I just further to that? I'll circulate the email to elected members. Vanessa, I've been talking to her this morning. Just they're after a bit more flexibility in terms of tables and chairs, as well as they're also there's a sort of 3 or 4 kind of things they're after, including the possibility of an amp and having music to try and, you know, create a good feel in Central City, and perhaps in a slightly different way than we normally allow. So I might just forward this to elected members just for their consideration. Perhaps.
Yeah, no, that would be useful. I was aware of that. I was just picking up on Mark's point about accessibility. You don't want one to solve one problem and create another. You do want to still keep our pavements accessible. But that can be covered off in the report, right?
It's a balance. I'm not trying to be too arbitrary about it or too sort of manner about it, but yeah, just the good wide footpaths. I think there's a ton of room.
Will help us to make the decision if we think about that. That's all. I've got Rob next.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Can I suggest staff look at, to me, the outdoor tables are akin to the restaurants paying rent for council property. We have already created a fund to give rent relief. And my way of thinking is that that relief's needed now rather than next year, which is where the projections are for next year's next year's finances. So if there's still some funds left in that rent relief space, why don't we set about providing that relief now, between now and the end of this financial year, when I think it's most needed by those restaurants. And then we can look at separately what level of relief we might give for the 2021 year.
Councillor Rob, that is happening. So we are refunding any outlet that has paid for tables and chairs. Yep. We are refunding the amount that they would have prorated for the time that they were closed for level 4 and level 3.
Yeah, no, I'm suggesting we continue that if there's a need for that relief between now and the end of this financial year, perhaps on the basis that we've still got some funds left in that pot that we set aside for rent relief on council-owned properties.
Yeah, I think that's been well utilised, to be honest, but I'll have a look. It's an idea. Yeah, I'll have a look at it. Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Just talking about making more space for tables and chairs, the sensitive issue of parking, I dare bring it up, but you know, there are potentially options for you know, parklets and things where if a business wanted to use the car park, say directly outside of their shop, you know, we could be more flexible with that and say, you know, that they could set it up with tables and chairs and have some appropriate screening through planter boxes to make it safe and cozy and things. But you know, there are lots of examples of other cities in New Zealand doing that already, and it could be, you know, an opportunity, just if they wanted to, not anything that we force on them, that they could do that.
We're very open to that. very open to that and actually working through that with a couple of people at the moment.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. So that was a good debate on that. Has the staff got everything that you need in the way of feedback around that? And we've got some steps forward to see if there's any fair and reasonable way that we can get all the information and make a decision prior to the annual plan in way of some COVID relief, really. So yeah, is that all right? So Sandra, is that it now?
Yes, that is. Thank you very much.
How long do you need for all that, Sandra? How long do you reckon that would take?
To do the policy work,
yeah,
it will depend a little bit on the extent to which HCBA are able to engage. I don't know how busy they are, but it will probably be a couple of months. I'll have to have a look at the meeting timetable as to when I can bring it back. Do you want me to bring it back to an EM briefing before, or do you want me to take it straight to community committee?
I think it's 6. Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's 6 and 2/3. I think we've done, those councillors that wanted to participate in the debate had their chance today to make some broad directional things. And I guess if you reflect that thinking in your options, there won't be a problem with bringing it back to community.
Great, thank you.
We've got a community meeting next week if you want.
Okay, cool, there goes your weekend. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you very much for a good debate, and it's heartening. It's nice to see us all pulling together, wanting to do the right thing for hospitality across its many forms in our CBD. So you know, I remain optimistic that if we get in and behind our good hospitality sector, that we get through COVID with less negative impact than we may have originally thought. That would be fantastic. So yeah, all right, thanks everyone. See you later.
Yep, thanks Jen and Sandra.
Yes, thanks very much, good work.
What's the later? Are we meeting at 3, are we?
No, don't know.